Hello and welcome back to the Building HVAC Science Podcast. It's our goal here to create better, more knowledgeable HVAC and building performance technicians, contractors, businesses by helping these two professions better understand each other. And our podcast aims to make customers happy in the homes and buildings they live and work in through the efforts of these folks. Today we're talking about a business aspect. Eric and I get a chance to sit down with Furman Haynes, a fellow we've gotten to know over the last year or so. He's a co-founder of WorkHero. They're exploring this challenge that small HVAC business owners face, and that's in the administrative burden that can often stifle the growth. Bet you there's some people out there that are starting to squirm in their seats right now. Or if you're standing, maybe just kind of squirm. Furman shares his journey into the HVAC industry, and he's inspired by trying to build organizations that support small business success. And he talks about some eye-opening experiences he had at industry events, especially ones recently, and his realization that paperwork and administrative tasks often overwhelm these small operators. So with that in mind, Furman and WorkHero partnered with the HVAC school recently to survey over 1,300 industry professionals. Through this survey, they created a very professional report. Link in the show notes. The report covers the state of the industry from company sizes and revenue patterns, how contractors balance technical work with business operations, because you got to stay in business in order to run a business. And then often it talks about why owners often hit a growth ceiling around 1 to 2 million in revenue, and then what kind of tools and technologies companies are adopting. You can glean a lot of nice insights from this report. Again, link in the show notes. You can also find out more about Furman through his LinkedIn link. He offers his email in the show notes, as well as looking at the WorkHero website. That's all in the show notes. So I'll stop talking about show notes, and you're going to listen to this episode with Furman Haynes talking about why small HVAC companies get stuck and how WorkHero can help them grow.
Hey everyone, welcome back to the Building HVAC Science Podcast. Eric Kaiser right here, Bill Spohn way over there, and a special guest today, Mr. Furman Haynes from WorkHero. Welcome to the show, Furman.
Thank you, sir. It's good to be here. As many guests on this show are, I'm a huge fan of you both, and it's just fun to be here.
Fantastic. Thanks for coming. And I think the audience or the listeners probably haven't heard or seen you or heard of you unless they were at a couple of events this year where they might have run into you. So why don't you give us your background and then maybe talk about where you've popped up in the radar for some people lately?
I grew up in Tennessee, in Nashville, and I like to say I come from a family of bad engineers and one good electrician. I think if I tried to work in the trades myself, I would have erred on the side of the family that was the bad engineer. So I love to build things, in this case, build organizations and companies focused on helping build up our workforce and especially small business owners. And that's become a real obsession of mine and a passion. And about a year and a half ago, I started to spend a lot more time in this HVAC industry. One of the first things I did actually is flew down to Ohio and met with Jim. And man, I don't know what, by the way, the grilled cheeses in Ohio. Has Jim ever taken you guys to this place? I talk about this all the time and I sound like, but like we got good cornbread and we got good barbecue down in Tennessee, but the grilled cheeses in Ohio, I think the best grilled cheese I've ever had. Anyway, I still talk about it to this day. But Jim was a great initial shepherd in many ways for me in this industry, and then went to the symposium. Let's see, it would have been January of 24, a year ago. And my biggest takeaway from that group of people, which is, as you guys well know, a really special group, is you have the top trainers and educators in the industry rubbing shoulders with small business owners and these craftsmen. And I was really interested in and talked to a lot of these guys. And I still remember and I'm in touch with Kate and Orrin from Fort Wayne, Indiana. Do y'all know them? A great owner-operator couple that runs this business. They have 6 kids. They homeschool their kids. And for the 3rd year in a row, they were bringing their kids down with them. And it's the one time they take any time away to come to this symposium. I was like, what? That is amazing. And so my biggest takeaway from that event was just the craftsmen and the real focus on quality in this corner of the industry. And I was really inspired by that. And that was, I would say, one of the inspirations or beginnings of what became WorkHero, which we'll talk about.
Sure. Why don't you get into that? What is WorkHero? Where did it start? Is it evolved?
It has evolved. One of the things we did, my business partners and I actually have a background in workforce training. So thought a lot about the talent needs in this industry, which we were just talking about before actually hitting the record button, and built a fast track training program focused on helping build up this industry. But then again, kept spending time with and ride-alongs. I got to know the counter guy at one of these Johnstone supplies really, really well. And again, when I spent time with the small business owners who were under a certain size, I was really focused on 2 to 3 to 4 trucks. They kept talking about the same things, which is paperwork, which is being overwhelmed, which is the number of hours they worked. And for me, that was a real light bulb moment. And one of them in particular that I always talk about was a friend named Ryan at Skywalker HVAC. I got to know him so well that we used to hit tennis balls together. And Ryan, by accident in some ways, actually ended up hiring an office manager. One of his friends had sold his business. Debbie, the office manager there, needed a place. And Ryan at that point was only 2 or 3 techs in the field plus him. But he said, yeah, I'll hire Debbie. And Debbie came in, and in like under a month, she transformed his business. I think she overhauled his website. He's still in Jobber. She completely changed the way he runs Jobber. She started tracking KPIs, which usually you don't see a business at that size doing. And she really was like, you got to know your numbers here. And the night or day shift there for us was a moment of, wow, actually the difference in many ways between a good and a great HVAC business when you're at this size is sometimes the office management, because exceptional management of your overhead, of your personnel, your equipment purchasing decisions, of the way that you're managing your rebate paperwork has such a big impact on your bottom line, but also on your own time and your own sanity. And if you can manage that effectively and put some systems into place, that's what we just ran the survey with Brian and the HVAC school team, which I'll talk about. But that's the biggest finding is like there's a bottleneck at a certain size where unless you invest, then you never can grow. So that was a light bulb moment for us. And so we want to help these technical craftsmen, but we see that they're just really burdened by the number we got from the surveys. Over 15 hours of work every week is spent on paperwork if you're a small business owner under 10 employees. And so that's what WorkHero does, is we help with that paperwork through expert office management at a price point that small owners can afford.
Got it. Some of the listeners may actually have taken part in the survey because our listeners overlap with the HVAC school a large degree, and we put it out on our social media too. So tell us about the purpose and the execution of the survey and then the results.
Brian and I started talking about this problem and about WorkHero and what we were trying to accomplish, but also just about the lack of data at this level. Really, like, what is it like to be a small HVAC owner today if you're under this many employees? What software are you using? How many hours per week are you spending in the field versus in the office? What's the makeup of your business, commercial, resident? Like, we just don't have. And so Brian was actually the one that suggested, hey, let's run a survey of our audience plus some. And that became the industry pulse survey, which hopefully we're going to run annually. And we ran it in January, got a really great turnout, 1,300 valid responses. And there are, I think, 3 main takeaways. Like every good report, we had 3 core findings. The first was these anecdotes that you hear of. I love a lot of the content that you guys do, but 2 of my favorite episodes were Jason Julian, and then it was Manley from Manitoba, which I think was more recent, both of whom talked about this. But the anecdote you hear about small business owners being overwhelmed by paperwork isn't just anecdote. Like, the burden is real. And we saw this in the data. And so 15.4 hours is the average number of hours per week that a small owner under 10 employees spends on paperwork. And those numbers only go up. And that relates to the second finding, which is we call this the administrative growth trap, but is basically there is a bottleneck. And we see this in the data around 1 to 2 million in revenue. I'll share the link, which we can put in the show notes to the report. There's a great graph that we have that shows this, but at about 1 to 2 million in revenue, you see the number of administrative hours really spike. And at that point, what do we know? We know, well, you're usually around 5, maybe 7 guys, and maybe your spouse is helping in the office. But that is the point when you need to either invest in delegating and hiring an outside office manager, invest in some systems, like really utilizing your FSM, or both. It's a critical moment, and those that make it past that point can continue to grow. But we see that there's a lot of businesses that get caught there. And as I said, a lot of that comes down to personnel. So another interesting data point from the survey was 79% of small businesses under 10 employees, either the owner or the wife is the one doing the office work. So only about 10% of those small businesses actually have a separate office manager. So that's the growth trap. And then the third finding was really about existing solutions. So we wanted to ask, we know this is a problem. Everyone knows this is a problem. WorkHero is not the first company to focus on this. What are those existing solutions out there and how are they working? And I think a lot to say here about AI and other software, but across the board, what we saw was that the technology out there, all of which is helping owners with their load calcs and with managing billing or managing their marketing, is underutilized by the small owners. So for example, just your FSM, 45% of small owners under 10 employees are using an FSM compared to 90% of larger.
I'm going to pause you for a second to define FSM because there's probably some people who aren't using it that doesn't know what it means.
Thank you, Bill. Field service management software.
Can you give a like?
Yeah. So Jobber, House Call Pro, Field Edge, those are the ones that most guys at this size are using. Obviously, Service Titan is the largest incumbent. They're great. Most business owners that we work with use one. And honestly, if you're not using one, we ask you to get onto one and we have our opinions about which one. But they all work. They all are focused on helping with the billing, the CRM, hopefully some dispatching as well, and really just helping you run your field operations.
So I'm looking at the survey now, and thank you for providing that link, which we will put in the show notes. I see from the small companies to large companies, you call it the opportunity cost. Where would you spend your time? Where would you apply your talents to help grow your business? And in smaller companies, it has to shift away from the technician, the technical aspects, in order just to cover the growth aspects, the paperwork, the management systems. Larger companies tend to spend more of their time training the technicians. It's a logical finding or following, but how do people get beyond that trap? And what does it look like on the other side? Do you have any stories or anecdotes about that?
Yeah, totally. What I would tell you, Bill, is it starts with actually an identity or mindset transformation. One of my favorite things about this industry is that these are all owner operators who started their own business because I was like Jason talking on y'all's podcast, which I just re-listened to the other day. He was working for someone else. He was actually the one out in the field doing all the work. And at some point he said, I can go do this on my own. And there's countless stories of this like that out there. But then you get to a certain size, again, around 5 to 7 guys where we see it, where increasingly you can't be the one actually hands-on equipment on the field edge or the vacuum pump. You need to be managing guys. You need to be managing your office manager and setting a vision for the company. And so there's a mindset shift, which has to start first. And I'll say, I see as many guys get burned out by this as actually make this transition. There's one, he's actually, I'll give him a shout out because he helped me with, in a lot of ways, learn this industry. His name's Jason at Comfort Craftsman Mechanical up in Massachusetts. And he was at, I guess he probably had 3 or 4 techs and eventually just left. He went and worked for a larger company. He'd been running his own shop for about 3 or 4 years. And why he left was, 1, he couldn't find guys, but 2, he was tired of the paperwork. And so I think there is this fatigue that you see there that is you have to be able to manage and manage effectively. Then second, I think there is a really important moment when usually there's a personnel decision that you have to make. So many of these businesses out there in the industry are husband-wife duos. And that's, again, another thing we love. But I'll give you another example, and I won't name them, but we just had another customer who, it's funny, you go to them and you talk to them about the changes they need to make to their business. And often the person in the office, sometimes the wife is like, oh, I got another job. I'm a nurse. I would love it if I didn't have to be the one that's doing the books and answering the calls. And so I think sometimes there's both hard but necessary choices that need to happen on that side to make some personnel decisions and invest in systems. And then third is definitely, as we like to say, just knowing your numbers. There's so much content out there, I think, for larger companies, let's say above 5 million, around business management, around at that level, what do you need to be doing to at a revenue per man hour per day level? I don't think there's as much focus on creating the playbook, if you will, for the owners at the really small level to say, what should you be focusing on that level? You don't have time to be a really sophisticated operation where you're going to be knowing every single billable opportunity and the gross margin. There's a lot of things you could be measuring, but what are the most important ones? We have some opinions there, but I think that no matter what, the third thing to get through that growth trap, if you will, is just starting to put into place some goals and some metrics. And that starts with actually best utilizing your software, using House Call or Jobber to just make sure everything's organized, make sure your billing process is working effectively and you're collecting on the spot, make sure that you have your price book set up effectively, which is a huge thing for these guys.
This is not to diminish it, but it's a typical business advice, and the technical aspect still has to be maintained. The quality aspect of delivery has to be maintained. So the product is covered, but the people in the process, that this is Marcus Lemonis from The Profit, his people, process, and product. So tell us about your product. Who's the ideal customer profile, and what does it do for them, and how does it work?
Yeah. And just quickly to respond to that point, I mean, one of the reasons we, again, love this industry is the focus on quality among the small owners is so evident. I saw Manley talk about this, and Jason as well, like whether it's the Better HVAC group that you guys are putting together or just Manley, I think was talking about commissioning and like the importance of that. It'd be so easy for him at that level to just say, screw it, like I got to keep moving. But that focus on quality is one reason that WorkHero exists. And Bill, I love that you're wearing the Keep HVAC local hat. That's what this slogan and this mission is all about, is helping the small craftsmen who care about quality work unlock and still focus on profitability, because that's not a bad thing. I think that unfortunately in this industry, and we'll talk more about this, there's the guys who talk about making money and selling out to private equity, and they're the only ones who are focused on business processes and efficiency. I believe, and we believe at WorkHero, you can be high quality and effective, but also efficient at the same time. So what do we do at WorkHero and how do we help? So we're really focused on the small operations, as I said, really below 10 employees. So think 2 to 4 trucks. Maybe you have maybe a spouse or a cousin or someone's in the office, but usually you don't have a full-time office manager, although we do work with businesses that do. What do we do for them? We are expert office management at an affordable price for these owners. What does that mean? That means you get access to a dedicated part-time office manager. We hire US-based. We like to say we hire the top 1% of office managers in the HVAC industry. And then we pair them with our back-end AI. What does that mean? Basically, we're just automating some of what they do. So making it faster to scrape some of the model and serial numbers and photos and upload them into a state rebate system. We're making it a little faster to take the PDF you get from an OEM on equipment pricing and be able to upload that into their personalized price book. So that's the kind of work we do for our owners, is support on things like billing, especially if you work with property managers or somewhere where you need a custom quote, price books, a lot of other paperwork, permits, the state rebate programs that are out there, equipment and warranties. And really, we can be a comprehensive back office solution for these guys. Anything you need, we meet with you every week and you get it. And the important thing here, Bill and Eric, is we've designed this to work for small operations. What we heard again and again is they don't need more software. Like they have enough things to click around in. And so we actually work in their existing systems. So we get access to their job or house call, we get access to their QuickBooks, and then we're just like your virtual office manager who really knows this industry, who's also AI powered to get the work done.
I think one big question I see a lot in social media and different forums is, how much do I charge? Some people ask that like immediately. They're like a totally different part of the country and they'll say, how much do I charge for this kind of job? And a lot of people get the angry face on and say like, you don't know your cost? You don't know what it takes to run your business? Do you offer coaching or advice in that function, or is that something the office manager does? Or how do you get the local pricing done right? Because that's critical.
It's critical. And unfortunately, I don't see a lot of good solutions out there for, as you said, both personalized, but also focused on small operations. You have pricing strategies and lots of consulting for the larger operations, but none for... The short answer is yes. We work here. We kind of like to think of ourselves as both head and hands. Like we're the hands to just get the paperwork done for you. But over time, we're also going to be your head to say, we're going to be opinionated about the way that you're using your FSM software today, to say, actually, you need to switch to collecting on the spot if you're in residential, for example. Or the way you're pricing these maintenance contracts looks off to us. And we think not only could you charge a little more, but there's lots of changes you can make there. So the short answer is yes, I believe, and this is something that talk to Brian about, talk to Chad Simpson about. We have to help coach and guide, but we have to do it in a community. And so we're thinking a lot about how we can, with Better HVAC and other groups like that, how we can build that real group that talks about business management and business basics for small operations. I don't care about the pricing strategy for a 50-person company. Like that's unfortunately a lot of what I see out there.
So I keep asking questions. I'll let Eric talk in a minute here. But one more I just got to get out of my head here is you have the benefit of, as you get more and more clients on board, you have the benefit of aggregating the data of what works and what doesn't work. So you're actually plugging people into a hive mind. You can see that data. Now, you might not share private data, but you'll share aggregate data and say, hey, these things work in this area, these don't work. So is that part of the scheme?
Absolutely. And that doesn't just apply. I mean, pricing is one obvious place where, as you said, data is just a tool to learn, and you can learn some things and then apply it to the local market. We do get a lot of questions about, well, how are you going to help understand our local market? So with a combination of experts who really know this industry and technology, we can, I promise you, like whatever the price is of that American Standard is charging you Texas, we'll incorporate that. But that applies not just to pricing. So marketing, for example, is another great area where there's so many general tools out there, but helping learn and then personalize is one opportunity. So there's a million different ways to take that data. But I will say, like, that is going to be the long-term value for contractors is our ability to pull out the data. A lot of what we're building on the backside is really focused on aggregating that data and being able to pull out the insights.
So I'm curious to get into a little bit more the nuts and bolts of what this office manager does for a business. Are they answering phones? Obviously, they're going to be looking at the books. They're going to be possibly looking at the dispatching. Are they helping with all of that stuff too? Because I know that's a big part of being a small business owner is taking those phone calls and trying to put all that together in your head. If you're one person running a business and you've got even yourself or maybe 2, 3, 4 other people working for you.
The phones question is a great one, Eric. So I'll give you a few examples of the work we're doing for our customers today. On the phones question, so I'll say we are actively figuring out or considering how to build out that capability, and right now have a wait list for, there's 3 tiers of plans at WorkHero. The highest tiered plan would include that call support, but so far there's just a wait list. But I'll tell you one story, which is one of our customers, Dirk. He runs a home performance contractor actually out in the Oregon area. And we were already working with him, doing some rebate paperwork for him and a few other things. And then his office manager, the day that he was supposed to, after months of implementation and planning, he was supposed to roll out Service Titan, his office manager quit. And he called us and was like, I don't know what to do. And so WorkHero was able to just double our capacity and basically fully fill in. And that included job management and tracking and quoting and billing and all the things that you do in Service Titan. It also included taking his calls. Eric, to your point, because we said, we got a customer that's in need, we're going to do it. That's a rare example. And again, something that we're considering building out. For other customers, they only have one. We process all the rebate paperwork for one of the largest companies in New York State. Not one of the largest, but there's still like 12 people, but they process more rebates through the Clean Heat program than almost anyone else. And so that's all we do for them. And it's like, we are just like fully focused on that. Then for others, a guy down in Florida, we started by building his price book because he really needed help with his price book. Then we were doing some social media posting and lightweight marketing. Then he needed help on the billing and bookkeeping side. And so we started to get into his QuickBooks. So it really looks different for every business because that's a truism in this industry that every business looks different. Obviously, that's true even when it comes to their office management. And the way that we were able to do that is we just meet with you every week and you help us set your priorities just like you would managing any other employee to then go get the work done.
That sounds like you're pretty flexible then. Somebody comes to you and says, hey, we got these problems. And you're going to, I'm guessing, say, okay, well, let's figure out how we can solve them.
Yeah, that's exactly right, Eric. What we realized is there's an opportunity here with AI to be able to be a comprehensive solution instead of only building a software that helps them with their billing or their rebates or their pricing. That's the benefit of working with WorkHero. And as I said it earlier, like we work on top of your existing software and we know like all of our office managers are Service Titan certified. Most of the companies we work with are too small to actually be on Service Titan, but if you know Service Titan, you definitely know every other software out there, especially House Call is the one that in Field Edge we really like. So the benefit there is like literally week to week, we are doing different things for our customers. And that's because one thing I'll quickly mention is our view on AI which is this like buzzword. Everyone loves to mention it.
Nobody really knows what it does, though.
Exactly. Even the AI machine learning researchers, it's a bit of a black box as to how it's able to actually spit out the output that it does. But our view, and there's so much hype here, and first of all, we're at the very beginning, both as a entire global economy and in the HVAC industry with this breakthrough technology and figuring out how to apply it. And so anyone who says they know exactly what it's going to look like, I think is kidding themselves. But the second thing is, and this is something I will credit Brian Orr for talking about and giving me this framework, is human AI human is the way that I see most of this work getting done. So if you take the clean heat program that I just mentioned, there's an actual human being, in our case, a WorkHero office manager, that needs to collect some of the documentation, photos, model and serial numbers, job details from the homeowner or sometimes from the technician. Then there's a middle part of the work, which is the manual, sometimes manual uploading and literally copy pasting of all of that information into a state portal. And this is where our automated workflow and what we built is able to, I would call it middle 50, 60%, is able to automate that. But then, especially with something like a rebate or a permit or a bill, you want the human who knows this industry, who's an expert at understanding, to come in and review and audit that output before it goes to a third party. And so human AI human is the way that we at WorkHero think, especially in industries like this one where it's just so operationally complex. I don't think we're going to be able to ever fully automate away a lot of these tasks.
Yeah, I would agree with you. And if anybody has played around with AI very much, they know that the outputs can sometimes be questionable at best.
Yeah, if you ask it anything that where like you actually have expertise, if you guys ask questions about whatever the latest VR, you'd laugh. So yeah, I totally agree.
So what are some of the things that people have come to you and you said no on and that you really can't do or aren't going to do?
So heavyweight marketing, fully rebuilding your website or managing your paid ads is not something we do today. But the big one is the call support that I mentioned. That's something that we know, especially if you're in the residential side, call volume and managing that is a huge pain point for owners. And we are happy to work with you to find vendors. We're happy to work with you to find other solutions. But again, as I said, we at WorkHero have not yet fully built out that capability. It's something that we're actively figuring out or considering. And then we do some bookkeeping support, which is, we know, really important to then be able to turn around and know your numbers and say, what's the gross margin of your service or install business, which that coaching is something that we do. But we do not do tax advising or filing, which is something that there are outside bookkeepers and CPAs that do provide that level of service. And that's not something we do either.
That's good to know. I think it's interesting because you're going to see a wide variety of markets. And I know from my experience talking to contractors around the country and different people around the country, I often hear a lot of the same comments or complaints or statements. And my market is so unique. My market is XYZ. And it's interesting to me that I hear a lot of the same things coming out of a lot of the markets. I've said to a couple people, I'm like, I really don't think you're that unique or your market is that unique in the way that you think it is. I think a lot of business owners are pretty much hitting the same struggles, obstacles, challenges, successes around. Do you see a similar trend or are you seeing more unique issues to different markets?
I would say for sure the problems in a general sense are more similar than they are different. When I talk to business owners who do bring up this point, and it's an important one, building codes look different. Permitting and inspection guidelines often look different. The rebate programs themselves, some states it's unified under one program, under utilities. There are lots of differences out there. I think that some of the power of this technology and AI is actually able to account for those differences and make sense of data and then be able to apply it effectively, which allows us to effectively, like the differences that we see between different rebate programs or between different ways or different distributor portals or OEM portals for registering equipment. Like they look a little different and some of them work better than others, trust me. But at a fundamental level, there's only so many inputs to a given. The outputs are almost always the same. Of course, there's different equipment and different, in some cases, different goals that we have in a given region. But a lot of the mechanics of these businesses look the same. So,
very good. For people listening, what action do you suggest they take?
Please go online, www.workhero.pro. And if any of what you just heard resonates with you and you're a small business owner, just get in touch with us. There's a form on our website. I will personally be the one to call you, usually within the day. And in addition to that, go to our blog page. Again, we'll link this in the notes where you can find this report. I will also say, if you're not a contractor and this mission around, as I said before, private equity is going to continue to do what it's doing in this industry. But there's always going to be thousands and thousands of small businesses out there who are doing good quality work and who suck at everything else and hate it. And how do we begin to have a conversation in the Better HVAC community, in the symposium community, in other to help? And I think this is a call to all of us to begin to build the community and the focus on business management and the tools to make all of our lives easier, but especially those guys on the ground and gals who are actually doing the good quality work.
As we wrap up here, we had a pre-recording conversation. You asked us what things are like at the National HVAC Educators event, and you said, what's the biggest surprise? I'm going to ask you that question. What was the biggest surprise for you from, say, where you were as this started 2-3 years ago?
I think it's the camaraderie and absolute absence of competition among the people that I've been lucky enough to get to know. I know there's other parts of this industry, trust me, I've read about it or actually interacted with some of it, but like among the symposium and that broader group of people, the amount of care and love and focus on quality and setting everything aside about your own business or ego and just like, hey, if you talk to this person, or hey, here's what I know, is I think the way every industry should work. I think that to me comes down to leaders like the two of you and so many others who have that service leadership and service mentality. That's from the outside, not the part of the industry that I thought I'd be lucky enough to get to know. And I'm just grateful for it.
Fantastic. Well, Furman, thanks for coming on the podcast. I look forward to getting people that listen to this to react to it, to take a look at the survey, to take a look at your website link. It's really great having you on. Where are we going to see you again? Where are you going to be next? Where are you going to be out there?
I know we just went through the conference circuit. I don't have any immediate. I was thinking about going down to New Orleans for the NHPC, but I'll be at some, if you're in the New York or broader Northeast area, I will definitely be at some regional distributor and other PHCC Industry Association events. So if anyone happens to be listening and is there, come find me. Otherwise, I'll also include my email in the show notes for sure. So just reach out.
Fantastic. Thanks, Furman. Look forward to seeing you in person again. And thank you for coming on the podcast today.
Absolutely. Thanks, Bill. Thanks, Eric.
Thanks, Furman.
Thanks for tuning in to this episode of the Building HVAC Science Podcast. We hope you got a little bit of knowledge and observation and maybe some actionable items you can work on in this conversation that we have with Furman Haynes. If you have any questions or want to suggest a topic, you can reach out to us at marketing@truetech-tools.com. The Building HVAC Science Podcast is a production of TrueTech Tools Limited. In full disclosure, I'm an owner of TrueTech, and the opinions expressed are those of my guests, my co-host, or myself, depending on who is speaking, of course. If you're in the market for any tools or test instruments mentioned in our podcast or just in general, take a look at what TrueTech Tools offers. That's TrueTechTools.com. And you can use the offer code HVACBS for a nice discount. I want to thank you for listening to and hopefully following us on Building HVAC Science. Here's a quote from Furman from the podcast. You can be high quality and effective, but also efficient at the same time. That's the hope that Furman has for helping the small HVAC companies get unstuck. Hope you enjoyed things here today on Building HVAC Science. Until next time, take care.